Hey, everybody. Welcome to Mental Health Matters. This is Tom Duff with St. Louis Counseling, and you are listening to Mental Health Matters again. And we are excited today. We're going to have a special guest here. We're going to introduce in a moment. But a couple things first. Remember, we talk about mental health. We make mental health okay to talk about around the dinner table, around the water cooler. We want to break down stigma. And so by doing that, we think we can improve overall society, right? Because mental health touches everything. So a quick reminder, Give STL Day is coming up here in a couple weeks, May 7th, I do believe. And St. Louis Counseling is looking to provide support to our essential workers, all right, our frontline workers. So go to our website, or actually you can go to our website and you can see some of the information about Give STL Day, but you can also go to givestlday.org / St. Louis Counseling, and that is Saint spelled out, St. Louis Counseling. So givestlday.org, St. Louis Counseling. We are going to be able to provide sessions for those frontline workers once we get through the curve here and once they realize, man, I need a breather. So look us up there. And also, look, if you're interested in our services, go to stlouiscounseling.org, and you can find a therapist that might be able to help you through whatever experiences and issues you may be facing. So, as I said, we always bring on guests, and today is no exception on the podcast Mental Health Matters. And we are going to bring on a teacher, right? It's a very interesting time of COVID-19, and we're going to have a little talk with Bridget Bowers, who is a high school teacher. Hi, Bridget. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good, doing good. I'm so glad you were able to come on. Now, I know a little bit about you because we share a mutual friend, right? And one thing I heard about is fantasy football. So I'm a sports guy, right? And I hear you like fantasy football. Is this true, or
I
am I being
do.
cheap?
It is true. I was looking for a way. I teach at an all boys high school, and so I was kind of looking for almost an entry point in with some of the students as far as getting them kind of engaged in my homeroom. And so I decided to kind of research and get to know fantasy football, something that I was not familiar with. And I ended up being really good at it. Much to their chagrin, I have beat all of them now 2 years in a row. My team has made it to the finals, and so I think we're breaking stereotypes, and it's
Yeah,
also a fun way to tease the guys a little bit with fantasy
right.
football. So yeah, I like it a lot.
Now, you got a team name that's one of those creative team names?
I do. They laugh at me. So I'm from Denver, Colorado originally,
Uh-huh.
and just say "Go Broncos" all the time, even though I'm not a huge sports person. I just feel like I need to. And so my team name is the Peyton Mannings, and they like to make fun of me for it, but I amuse myself, which
Hey,
sometimes you
you're
have to do with
winning.
a teacher. So exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So
yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Did you pay
yeah,
attention to the draft last night then at all, the NFL draft?
no.
Okay,
No,
so
I'm definitely not as well versed as a lot of them are, which I think just adds to the frustration. But I pick people that smile in their profile pictures and have good ratings and seem to be overall good people, and they end up playing really good football. So what can I say?
wow.
Yeah,
What an interesting way of picking a team. I
I
may try
know.
that this year then.
Go
So,
for it. The
yeah,
Smilers usually do pretty good things. So
awesome, awesome.
yeah,
Well, yeah, as we said, you do teach. You teach here locally in St. Louis, right, at
yeah,
a
yeah,
Jesuit high school, the Smet.
yeah. I teach
Um,
at just.
awesome. Now, why did you want to become a teacher, and when did you first realize you wanted to teach?
So I was fortunate in that I've always grown up with an appreciation for teachers. My dad is a high school teacher. He's been teaching at a Jesuit high school in Colorado now for almost 20 years. So I was always kind of around that. But quite frankly, I didn't think I would be a teacher even at the beginning of my undergraduate career. I went in, as a lot of high school students do, as a bio pre med major, thinking I was going to go to medical school. And through my courses, I realized that the courses that really stood out to me were courses that were focused on people rather than focused on science. So I got really into psychology and bioethics and these moral questions, and I started to kind of realize that I liked having conversations with people about those things. And then I did a program after I graduated. I was kind of looking for next steps, as a lot of seniors in college do. And I came across this program called the Alum Service Corps, which is a program for graduates of Jesuit high schools and colleges to go back and teach at a Jesuit high school for a year. So to kind of be in the Catholic school system, and you're a complete volunteer, so you don't get paid or anything, but it's just kind of a way to give back for your education. And so I did that, and I was placed at Smet in St. Louis, and I fell in love with it. It was just one of those rare gifts in life where you all of a sudden realize that you are doing what you're supposed to be, and your gut is telling you that this is where you need to be. And it was just kind of a light bulb moment that entire year. And so that's kind of
Wow.
what started it. And I applied for jobs, and Desmet ended up wanting to keep me on as a full-time teacher, and I loved it. So I said, sure.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, and you teach freshman English, and you're also kind of in charge of like student life too,
Yeah.
something along
Yeah.
those lines, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so you freshmen, right? How is teaching freshmen? That could be interesting.
It's really lovely. I've taught a couple of different grade levels, and in the past couple of years, I've had the opportunity to just teach freshmen. And I find that a real gift because I think they're almost kind of the lost puppies of the high school world in a way,
Mhm.
because everything's new, right? And they're overwhelmed, and they're trying to make friends, and they're trying to figure out where they are in this big environment where they have, guys that are a lot bigger than them walking down the hallway. And really they're just trying to figure out who they are, in a sense. And I think that's what appeals to me as a teacher, is that not only can we have conversations about literature. I'm an English teacher, so I love kind of seeing their brains start turning as far as questions I ask when it comes to a book that we're reading. But I also get an opportunity to get to know them as people, and to really challenge them to be their true self, as opposed to the self they feel like they have to put on as a new person in high school. And so it's a really unique experience. I really like it. I think in the teaching world, there's almost a stigma against teaching freshmen,
Mhm.
but they're really fun. They're really fun. They bring great energy. They're incredibly forgiving, and it's neat. It's neat to see them kind of grow up from a middle schooler to a high schooler by the end of the year.
Wow. Wow. So with COVID-19, right? The world changed, right? Not just us here locally in St. Louis, but the world changed. The way schools operated changed, of course. And so, what was that experience like from all of a sudden going from classroom instruction? That's how you go about your day, going into the school and the students being there, to all of a sudden the virtual world, right? And trying to just maintain relationships, and also make sure kids are getting educated, and things not left off. What was that like for you to have to begin that experience?
Yeah, it's been a challenge. I think I've been fortunate in that Dismet, I think, obviously didn't predict a crisis like this, but they have for the past couple of years really invested kind of time and resources and professional development in getting teachers to think from an innovation perspective. So I participated in a cohort this summer where we talked about things like virtual reality as a learning tool and that type of thing. And so, as far as having tools at my disposal, it's been pretty easy's too strong of a word, but it's been accessible in that I have a good network of colleagues, and I have a lot of resources at my disposal, and a lot of different teaching resources have made their premium accounts free right now for teachers. So kind of online forums that allow students to post a video response of themselves as opposed to just typing on a discussion board, right? A lot of those websites are making all of their services free right now, which has been really, it's been great. It's been a real gift. The thing that I am struggling with the most is the interaction, right? The day-to-day stuff, the reason you become a teacher in the first place, right? Those fun moments in the hallway where you get to say hi to a student you taught last year, or getting to check in with certain students that maybe aren't the most vocal, but should be on your radar for different things, mental health being one of them, right? You get a sense of that when you're in a physical space with them and you're able to kind of see how they're doing and say good morning. That it's a little bit more challenging to have that access point when you're working remotely. And also being sure to balance my curriculum and what I'm trying to teach from an English teacher perspective, while also understanding that I have students that are coming from very different places. I have students that have very limited internet access. I have students that are watching siblings right now because their parents are essential workers. And so finding ways to be equitable while also still trying to maintain the curriculum has been a little bit of a challenge. Um, so yeah, it's been a very strange couple of weeks, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Because you see a lot of parents posting on social media the struggles, right? Like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to stay at home and work and help kids through the educational components and stuff as well too. But I think some teachers are a little slow to like say like, hey, this is really hard too for us, just because they don't want to come across like, um, like, hey, this is harder on me than harder on you. Everyone's sometimes afraid of offending each other, but I mean, from the perspective of our educators, I mean, this is just as frustrating and hard as well too. And I've seen some teachers post like, I genuinely miss the kids. I miss being around them, and I think it's okay for educators and teachers and staff at schools to be able to say this is hard, because this isn't what we signed up for either. We anticipated a regular school year. Have yeah has your colleagues and yourself kind of felt that as well too?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I can speak for them. I'm certainly speaking for myself when I say I didn't go into teaching to sit at a desk behind a computer all day, right? I went into teaching for the interpersonal relationships. And so, yes, we meet as a department every other day on a Zoom call, and um, without a doubt, when we do a check in with each person says, "I miss the kids," right? Because we do. It's very challenging and it's very hard. And I think as teachers, I think education isn't necessarily as valued as it could be in our country, just kind of socially and economically. And so I think we're a little bit used to not complaining, to a certain extent. But I think it's really important for teachers to kind of check in with themselves right now and understand that you don't need to be perfect, right? I read an article that about kind of some research done with remote teaching, and the conclusion they came to was basically take what you were hoping to teach and cut it in half, and then even then give yourself some grace, right? Because it's not realistic. And I think we hold ourselves to a really high standard, as we should. We have a big responsibility as teachers, but I think we also need to understand that this is hard for us too, right? And from a mental health perspective, I think we also need to check in with ourselves. I know I do, and give ourselves a little bit of grace and a little bit of a break, because I'm certainly not being the teacher that I want to be right now, but I'm being the teacher that I can be right now, you know, and that's
Yeah,
okay.
that's a great perspective, and to be able to say like that's okay. I think
Right.
grace is a really important word,
Mhm.
because we're trying to hold ourselves to these just such high standards, and this is the way I've done it, and this is the way it should work. And no, everything has changed on so many different levels with that. Now, with with the kids, right? How hard is it to, because I see my kids and some of their computer screens, if I'm allowed around them, like, get away, don't walk, don't look at this.
Yeah.
But like, it's like, how hard is it to engage the youth in regards to the distractions in the home? And I mean, what are some of the things you're seeing?
You know what's fascinating about that is I have been shocked with how willing my students are to engage with my class remotely. I thought when this was first announced that it would be a challenge to get guys to even respond and to do the work. And I've actually found the opposite. I am finding that students are looking for things to do. I am finding students are looking for connection points. Because I think they're a little bit scared, as we all are right now. This is very strange, and so I think they're almost craving a sense of normalcy. And so I'm trying to provide that for them. It was funny 2 days ago. One of my sections, I do a Microsoft Teams meeting once a week to kind of check in with the guys and make sure that they know what we're doing for the week and to kind of have that live interaction as much as I can. And I finished kind of previewing the week with about 15 minutes, and the students stayed on the meeting and
Wow.
because they wanted the companionship and they wanted to be with each other and they were asking about my new cat and we just all kind of talked for a little bit, and that was completely student driven. And so I think they are looking for things to do. They're looking for points of connection. And I'm even having students admit that they have started reading for fun, which they never thought they would do, right? And as a teacher, I'm like, yes, but uh,
Yeah.
it's funny that that has become such a revelation for them. Books
It
are
took a pandemic.
amazing,
It took a
right?
pandemic. Yeah.
Right. But it's there are points of challenge. I every once in a while I have to follow up with a student, but they've all been really responsive. I was joking with one of my colleagues. He was saying that, oh my gosh, they're checking their email more now than they ever do during the school year, and they're actually emailing me if they're going to miss my class, right, or something like that,
Hmm.
just because I almost feel like they've stepped up to the plate in a cool way. Um,
Uh-huh.
so I'm fortunate in that regard for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. Like with my son's a sophomore, and one of the things I noticed is like he's I think he's working and he's not procrastinating, and he's getting it done quicker than what he usually would do, in school. And part of it, I think it's kind of like I don't have to be inside as much during the entire day. Like I'm not required to be inside the school. But yeah, it's just interesting. So for him, keep it up because I know you listen
Yeah.
to these every single time. Um, but
It's also interesting because you, as a teacher, you're always trying to get better at your craft, better at what you do. And you're starting to realize things that you do in the classroom that may end up being kind of superfluous, right? Like, oh my gosh, they are getting things done and they are finding that internal motivation. So how can I almost capture what's happening right now and then translate it to when we go back? What are things that I'm learning now? So that's a good point of reflection, I think.
yeah, the opportunities that we were forced into this, and now we I think are discovering some opportunities with how we go about, well, just not school, but just life in general, and there's different things that we can maybe implement. I think a lot of businesses will realize, like, hey, there's certain people or certain positions that can work from home, and it can be okay, and for kids, maybe schools will begin to do a little bit more with online teaching. Maybe not all the way. I know you probably wouldn't like that too
No,
far, but I do think the socialization, and that's what we've heard from our therapists when we're working with kids and even adults. But boredom is starting to set in a little bit more. Feelings of isolation is starting to set in more. We're
yeah,
seeing a lot more people. I've just noticed in my neighborhood and stuff, more kids are starting to hang out now because they're just like, okay, we just got to do something. And I think that's how we have to, and hopefully the orders will ease up here through the month of May as we go. Um, but but with kids who may have been struggling previously with maybe mental health or just anxiety, have you noticed any increase or decrease even with any of your existing school kids, or even what your colleagues might say?
Yeah. I think naturally it's increased. Um, I know my anxiety level has increased. And I think with certain students, it's our job as teachers to be really mindful when we're checking in with them. If a student that I know is struggling with some mental health, um, and they're the ones to check in late for my class, or they're the ones not turning in the work, all of a sudden that's a little bit more of a red flag for me than a kid who slept through his alarm once. And so being sure to kind of check in with him or send him an email or looping the counselors and the parents in. Our counseling department is doing a really good job at kind of keeping tabs on kids that may need a little bit of extra support during this time. Um, I also think this has been fascinating in that my students are starting to realize, and they've reflected as much with me, that technology isn't a substitution for in-person interaction. I think before this, they saw social media or things like Instagram and Snapchat and all of that as the exact same as hanging out with their friends on the weekend, or playing video games with their friends is the exact same. And I think once that option was taken away, they're starting to realize that it doesn't do the same thing. Um, and they're craving that in-person support. And so it's also my job as a teacher to try to create that as much as I can, or to encourage, healthy mental health habits. I'm fortunate in my discipline that I'm able to kind of incorporate that. So, with a book that we're reading, I'll have them journal about a problem that the, main character might be facing, as a way to kind of help them develop that habit and that moment of reflection. But it's also a way for me to kind of check and see how certain guys are doing that might kind of already be on my radar. Um, so you try, but we certainly are more limited in that capacity, and that's something that I'm struggling with for sure.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a great topic question for even families as well too, sitting around the dinner table, or just when you can grab your kid and start talking, and it's like, you know, pointing out and being intentional with that question of, don't you miss that interaction with people, with schools? And that's the thing, my kids have always said is like, yeah, I miss the people. I miss the people. And so making them, help them understand that there is a difference now. And we're always talking about like, get away from the video games. It's not, but now might be the prime time to strike with like, see, social media isn't just as good. Social interaction. So being intentional in those conversations, I think you're right on with that. Right on.
Yeah, and they respond to it too, and they. I was expecting. We recently announced that we're going to be out for the rest of the semester, and I was really sad,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, because I have a great group of guys this year. I really do, and I was bummed about that, and I asked them on a discussion board what their reactions to that were, and I was expecting, no school and longer summer and kind of all of that, but they were sad too. And who knew that high school students would be sad about kind of an extended time away from school?
Yeah.
But that's exactly what happened. And so I keep emphasizing to them what a gift their education is. They're starting to realize it now that it's been changed so much.
Yeah. Now, with your involvement in like student life activities, and I might be calling it the wrong term, but your involvement with that, and so of course we know that sports, spring sports, gone, extracurricular activity, everything that goes with school. What are some of the things, one, that you're hearing from the youth in regards to missing out on those things? I mean, proms and everything. But then two, also, like, what are ideas that maybe school personnel are thinking about, and how to like try to replenish that missing part of their lives?
Sure. It's challenging. So I'm the director of student council. I work in our student activities office, and my job is to facilitate everything outside of the world of sports and academics, basically, with another colleague of mine. And so we've been talking to our group of student leaders about kind of what are you hearing from your peers. I think now more than ever is a time to try to listen to kids as much as we can. So whether it's sending out a survey being like, what do you miss the most? Or trying to kind of maintain that as much as we can. I think students are bummed. I think, prom is up in the air right now. We're going to do what we can. Today, the reason I'm able to talk to you was supposed to be our junior ring day. And the juniors, aren't having that ceremony today. So finding ways that we can either have those things in the future or, finding a way to make those connections without maybe the in-person ceremony. It's challenging, right? I know a lot of guys who are dependent upon scholarships for college because of their sports, and now they don't have a season. And so that's difficult as well. So there's a lot that these guys are having to process through outside of the world of school, and I try to be mindful of that as a teacher. We've been talking as a school about how to get guys involved still extracurricularly, and so we've been doing different challenges. Our school has a house system. It kind of runs like Harry Potter in a way. So we break the student body up into 6 different houses, and they're named after different Jesuit priests. And they compete all year to get house points. And the winning house at the end of the year gets a prize, and they win the house cup and everything. And so last Friday, we actually did a remote house day where we let out of school early. So we stopped classes at 1:30, and then we had a bunch of challenges that the guys could go participate in, like wear your house shirt and go catch a fish, or wear your house shirt and do a trick shot in your backyard. And they could either email those videos to me or my colleague, or post them and tag Smet on Instagram. And that was a way to kind of get them involved, or to get them to realize that there's still this community, even though you're not seeing it physically day to day. So little things like that I think are helpful, but I think the more that we can listen to kids, the better. I've always been an advocate of that. I think high school students are really adept at articulating what they need and what would be good for them. And so I think my job right now more than ever is to ask them, what do you need? And then bring that to the administration and try to figure out a way to make that happen as much as we can.
Which is also good advice for families as well too. Listen to, and sometimes it's listening to the actions as well too. Sometimes it's not articulated right, but we know the behaviors tell a lot. So listening with your ears and your eyes as well too, and that can lead us to a lot. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, do you, as a teacher, right? When we talk about, you mentioned earlier, a lot of times it's not as valued, especially as a monetary way in our society, right? But what drives you? Like, what's that passion that you have to invest in this as your career? Yeah, you were called to it, right? But like, what now that you're in it? Like, what is that passion? Because sometimes I think one of the things I like to point out, in this mental health matters podcast world, it's like what makes people tick too, right? And getting to know yourself. You talked about taking the time to check in with ourselves, and so sometimes it's awesome to hear someone who's in the middle of it, right? And they're teaching and they love it, and like it helps others realize why that calling is there.
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to articulate. I think one of the best phrases that I've encountered in my kind of Catholic education career, St. Ignatius talks a lot about kind of movements or the deepest desire of your heart. If you can identify what moves you spiritually, hone in on that. And I was fortunate in that teaching moves me. I have moments throughout my day where I'm interacting with my students where I feel moved, and they are so inspirational, and they're funny, and they're goofy, and they're they are willing to give a lot of themselves if you develop a relationship of trust in the classroom. And if you treat them like they deserve to be heard. Um, and I wake up every morning and I get to go talk about books, and I get to see students be challenged. I tell them, and I tell the parents as a back to school night too, that part of my job as a Catholic educator is not just to teach the curriculum. If all I did at the end of the year was teach them a lot about English, but I didn't challenge them to be the best version of themselves, or at least try to discover who that might be, then I didn't do my job, right? And so I think of it as an immense responsibility, but also an immense privilege to be able to educate young people and try to get them to think about the problems in our world today, right? Mental health being one of them, you know, and there are so many things I think that we take young people for granted for. And sometimes they're seen more as a problem than they are as an asset. And I have seen incredible, inspiration from my students. And so if I can help kind of facilitate their voices to be heard, I think that that's really what moves me, is providing a space for my students to discover themselves and then to figure out how that might be of service to the larger community. So in a way, I feel more like a coach than a teacher in the classroom, because I'm just helping them figure out the best way to kick a football. It just happens to be
Mm-hmm.
through English and asking tough questions,
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's a privilege, really. They bring me a lot of joy. My job brings me joy, selfishly. So if I can keep doing that, then I consider that a win.
That's awesome. Well, it's no wonder with your philosophy and why you're called, why you were the 2019 Teacher of the Year there, right?
Yeah.
Didn't know
Thank
I
you.
knew that, huh? Yeah.
Thank you.
Did some research, yeah.
Yeah.
And congratulations on that. But yeah, I mean,
Thank
I
you.
think that's how you described it. Helps me understand why somebody would be called to teach, and to have such an impact on the next generation. I think that's huge.
Mhm.
Um, so, when
I
you talk about, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry.
No, you're
I
fine.
was, after my volunteer year, a contract isn't guaranteed. Obviously, you don't go into a year of service to then be hired by the school that you were serving. You go into a year of service to serve. And I was applying for different graduate school programs and jobs and whatever. And I ended up getting a full ride to Boston College to go for graduate school there. And then Smet offered me a position teaching, and I was so torn. And everyone in my life was telling me, "Go get your graduate degree. Are you kidding? Like, go to Boston." And I had that movement. I was like, I don't know. And so I was talking to a priest about it, and his advice was, it sounds morbid, but it actually worked really well. It's called the deathbed meditation. And he said, I want you to picture yourself on your deathbed and you're surrounded by your friends and your family, and you are saying, in 2017, I had this choice, and this is the choice that I made. And he said, describe both choices. Which one feels better to you to be describing to your friends and family? And I said, oh, teaching. And he said, well, okay, then that might be telling you something. And that stuck with me. And so thinking about at the end of this life, what do I want to be able to tell the other people in my life that I did? I think teaching's a pretty cool thing to be able to talk about.
Hmm. And then, you mentioned mental health in regards to, you've mentioned it a couple times. So it's like I think about how much over the years schools have realized, I mean, that topic wasn't discussed at all you know, growing up for me, and but now, and we have we're in over 100 different schools, and we place therapists inside the schools. It's one of our programs here as well too. And like the cohesion that I've seen formed with schools and mental health, and then the understanding from both, because at once upon a time, educators are like, well, these kids are coming here we're supposed to teach them, and we need to get through this curriculum, and the ability for us to provide these other services now is tremendous. So, and it
Yeah.
sounds like that's what, one, you completely understand, but two, also probably the school systems as well now, so seem more open to that.
Absolutely. I think schools realized that students are less willing to learn about math and science if they're suffering from anxiety and depression, right? And
Mhm.
it sounds like such a simple thing, but I think taking care of the whole person as opposed to taking care of just the student is really important, because you're not going to be able to educate them on your subject matter if they aren't in a place where they can learn. So schools are absolutely moving towards that. And I think that's really important. I think often our young people don't have the vocabulary to talk about their own mental health, or they have expectations put on them where they need to kind of toughen up or kind of just move through it, or it's just a phase or that type of thing. And I think the more that they have the ability to recognize that it's okay to talk about this and it's okay to ask for help, and you're not weak for asking for help, um, I think that's incredibly significant. And I've definitely seen a shift even since when I was in high school. I think that's great, and it needs to continue.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, mental health touches every component of our being, and every part of our world and society. And so, we can get as early as possible of early intervention inside the schools and getting kids to understand themselves and each other. Then ultimately, the outcome will be hopefully stronger, and be, of course, less stigma as well too. So,
Absolutely.
what kind of wrapping up here? What through this COVID-19 crisis, right? And we know we're coming up to May anyway, and the end of the school year, and some schools go into June. But what words of encouragement would you say to kids and parents that are out there as we kind of wind down a school year in a whole different way than we normally do and head into a summer?
Yeah. I would say you're doing enough. Parents should not feel that they have to all of a sudden teach their kids everything that they would be learning in a normal school atmosphere. As teachers, we certainly aren't even able to do that. And this is what we do for a living, right? And so parents should not feel that they are failing their kids in any way if they aren't being the teacher and the parent and the coach and everything all at once. You're doing enough. And when we get back to normal, I can catch your student up with the curriculum. What you need to be focused on now is mental health, and making sure to check in with them and make sure that they're doing the work that they can be doing, and everything else will fall into place. And I'll take it once they're back. So they're doing enough, and I think students just. Once again, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Take time to check in with yourself. Go outside if you can, and just I think this is just a time where we all need to be really understanding. I was talking to my mom the other day about a work frustration she was having, and then at the end of it, she kind of came to the conclusion that everybody gets a pass right now, right? We're in a global pandemic. And so
Uh-huh.
just have a little bit of confidence, and cut yourself, a little bit of slack, and just know that everyone's in this, and we're all doing what we can, and we're going to try to end the school year with some normalcy, but it's not going to be a normal school year, and that's okay. And at the end of the day, as long as people are healthy and happy and physically okay, then I think that's a win, and everything else can fall into place after that.
Awesome. Well, those are great words of, just great words of our future, right? Great advice. I mean, really,
Yeah,
honestly. So,
thank you.
thank you so much, Bridget, for being on
Thank
with
you for
us today.
having me.
Um,
Of
you're
course.
doing amazing work too, and you make sure you keep taking care of yourself as well too. And
Thank you.
so glad you're able to share all of this with us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
All right. Until next time, this is Tom Duff with Mental Health Matters. Check us out at stlouiscounseling.org. See you later.